One seems to have lost a little girl. As I get older, it's harder for my brain to recover back to my thoughts. As we are here now, finally, after our journey at the end of Ecclesiastes, bringing it all into focus, the purpose of this book, of why we're looking at this, and he comes back to the same questions that he did before. Where can meaning be found? Is there a purpose in this life? Is there significance in this life? Or is it inherently insignificant? Is it truly vanity? Remember that throughout this book, he has looked at this world alone, only through the perspective of what we can see, what we can feel, what we can touch, what we can experience, trying not to look at the divine meaning and purpose. So can there be just meaning here? And as we'll see, he comes back to verse number 8, vanity of vanities, says the preacher, all is vanity. He comes back to a hopelessness. He comes back to a purposelessness because he's tried every single way to try to figure this out, and he can't. One writer, Douglas Adams, who wrote The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, had a story of this ancient alien civilization that spent all of their resources and all of their times making a super advanced AI supercomputer so that they could find the answer to life, the universe, and everything. And so they spent all of their resources, depriving their entire civilization of everything else, to build this big supercomputer. And finally the day was there. They could turn it on. They turned it on. They asked, what is the answer, oh computer, to life, the universe, and everything? It computed and turned and whizzed and gave the answer 42. And then the whole thing blew up. What they realized is they failed to ask the question. They got the answer without the question. Now, that's a silly story, but it's there to illustrate. Douglas Adams was trying to show the absurdity of this life, and that even he, who was not a Christian, and only trying to figure it out on your own is only going to come up with absurd answers. Because for him, the universe was inherently absurd. It didn't make sense. And time again, through philosophy, all throughout the ages, people have tried to figure out, where can meaning be found? In our day and age, there's a vapid answer, one that doesn't hold any kind of steam or water. That is, well, you make your own meaning. Your own meaning means it's self-contained only to you, and when you die, it becomes then meaningless. And this is what the author of Ecclesiastes is actually dealing with over and over again. He's tried every way to find meaning, but he comes to this irreconcilable instance of death. Ecclesiastes chapter number 12, verse number 1, let us read our text. Remember also your Creator in the days of your youth, before the evil days come, and the years draw near, of which you will say, I have no pleasure in them. Before the sun and the light and the moon and the stars are darkened and the clouds return after the rain, and the day when the keepers of the house tremble and the strong men are bent, and the grinders cease because they are few, and those who look through the windows are dimmed, and the doors of the street are shut, when the sound of the grinding is low, and one rises up at the sound of a bird, and all the daughters of song are brought low. They are afraid also of what is high, and terrors are in the way, and the almond tree blossoms, and the grasshopper drags itself along. The desire fails, because man is going to his eternal home. And the mourners go about the streets, before the silver cord is snapped, and the golden bowl is broken, or the pitcher is shattered at the fountain, or the wheel broken at the cistern, and the dust returns to the earth as it was, and the spirit returns to God who gave it. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher, all is vanity. Besides being wise, the preacher also taught the people knowledge, weighing and studying and arranging many proverbs with great care. The preacher sought to find words of delight, and uprightly he wrote words of truth. The words of the wise are like goads, and like nails firmly fixed are the collected sayings. They are given by one shepherd. My son, beware of anything beyond these. Of making many books, there is no end, and much study is a weariness of the flesh. The end of the matter. All has been heard. Fear God. Keep his commandments. For this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every deed into judgment with every secret thing, whether good or evil. He starts this off by speaking to the youth, speaking to young people. In verse number 1, he says, remember your Creator in the days of your youth. It is easy when you have strength of body, when you don't have many aches and pains, when you feel self-sufficient, when you have your future ahead of you, when you haven't crossed that corner of middle age, meaning you have less days ahead of you than you had behind you, it's easy to think, well, I can do this life on my own. He reminds them to remember your Creator. Have that in your mind first and foremost. Remembrance is powerful. Remembrance puts the present in perspective through the power of the past. It doesn't just say we're just living to sustain, but it remembers what was before, where God brought us from. All the time through the Old Testament, over and over again, he keeps reminding them, I am the God that brought you out of Egypt. So every single thing you face after this, whether it be in Judges, or whether it be with David, or whether it be in the era of the kings, or whether it be in the exile, every single time God reminds them of his covenant with them, he says, remember, I'm the God that took you out of Egypt. I delivered you then, I'm going to deliver you now. Remembrance is powerful. It's not just recalling facts that we once knew. It's positioning yourself in your life in light of what you know to be true. God did this before in the past, and he'll do it for me again in the future. It is, in essence, faith based on the promises of God is this type of remembrance. The call to remembrance is all throughout the Bible. Why? Why does it say so many times to call us to remembrance of things that seem to be simple truths that we already know? Because it's so easy for us to forget. It's so easy for us to get distracted in the cares and concerns of this present moment, this tyranny, this dictatorship of the present, of the immediate, that we forget where God has brought us from. So easy for us to be lulled away from living the truths that we already know. The hardy core of mature theology isn't in learning new things. It is in the deeper remembering of the old things you think you already know and have already moved past from. It's returning back to the first principles. You know, when Pastor Skip does the catechism questions, we say it's kids, what time is it? Those truths are for all of us. That God is the first and best of beings, that all of our life is geared and centered on him. These truths, if we let them get into our heart with remembrance, are deeply powerful. Don't ever think that you're moved past something. I know even a few weeks ago, Pastor Skip was doing a thing for Trail Life, a values lesson about trust and faithfulness in God. And he was, of course, talking to little kids, little children. But I was getting blessed hearing these absolutely simple, basic, elementary truths of the faith. We should never move past remembering who God is and his promises to us. In verse 3, talks of those who look through windows. This is an idiom, which is a figure of speech in the olden biblical times of those with dashed hopes. You can picture someone sitting in a room, maybe in their living room, staring aimlessly out of a window, thinking of days gone by. This is that metaphor. There is coming a time, you see, when all of these stories, all of these images, this poem that we have from verses 2 down through verse 7, of things ending, of things coming to completion. Even in verse 1, he says, remember your Creator in the days of your youth, before the evil days, the bad days, and the years draw near, of which you will say, I have no pleasure in them. There are some times that I, often in the hospital when I visit people, and They've had so much pain, so much suffering, and they make statements like, I'm just ready for God to take me home. And sometimes the nurse will get scared and thinking, oh, they're going to do something to themselves. No, they're not going to do anything to themselves. It's just their time has come. They're ready. They're prepared. This life no longer has pleasure for them. This life no longer has the vigor of vitality anymore. And it comes to their time when everything is drawing to a close. So in verse 5, he says, all these images, from birds that no longer sing, to the daughters that were throwing parties and now they're brought low, to grasshoppers, and all of these nature images of things stopping and ending. That even if the world and nature goes on, the world will seem to stop when it's your day of death, when it's your day of completion. The desire even fails. It talks about in one translation, it says the grasshopper drags itself along and desire fails. There's this term here for the capaberry bush that was supposed to bring about vitality if you ate of it, and it's saying even this medicinal herb doesn't do anything anymore. Verse 7, the dust returns to the earth as it was, and the spirit returns to the God who gave it. So this world, this body, returns down to the dust, but our spirit goes back up to God. Now, one day in the resurrection, if we want to get theological, there will be a reuniting of body and spirit. But what he's talking about right here is the age we live in right now. There is this ultimate separation of the who you are-ness, the reality of who you are, that you don't just have a soul, you are a soul, and it will be separated from your body, which will decay and turn to ash and dust and be no more. This whole section relates to death. You see, there are really two eschatons, two end times. That's what the word eschaton means, the end times. There is one for the world, and we think of all the charts and graphs and movies and books and debates that have happened over what's going to happen in the end times. But there's also an end times for every single individual personally. Regardless of when prophecies become fulfilled, or when the rapture might be, or when nations or systems come to an end, you will have your own personal end times one day, and it may not coincide with any of those things. In fact, in the history of the world, throughout time, since the beginning of time, it is estimated that over 1 billion people have died on this planet throughout the ages. Now, 1 billion is a very hard number for us to think of, so how do we illustrate? 100 billion, I'm sorry, not 1 billion, 100 billion people have died throughout the ages on this planet. So, if you were to count one number every 3 seconds, so the first few numbers are going to be easy, 1, 2, 3, 4, but the later numbers, 400,697, take more time. So let's just average out 3 seconds per number. How long would it take you to count to 1 billion? Well, it would take 95.1 years to count to 1 billion if you counted every 3 seconds. This is 100 billion, so that's 951 years worth of people. If you were to name every one person that's ever lived on this planet and died, it would take you 951 years to do so. To illustrate further, you would have had to start in the year 1072 AD to have it completed today. Or if you started today, it would take until the year 2974. Only 7% of all humans that have ever lived since the beginning of time are currently alive at this point in history. That means that of all of human existence, living, dying, loving, enjoying, being sad and sorrowful, 93% of anyone who has ever lived on this planet is currently dead. Now, you can stick your fingers in your ears and numb yourself with entertainment all you want, but barring the resurrection, it is a guarantee that you will join the ever-growing 93% of those who used to be alive and are now counted among the dead. So, verse number 8. The end of his conclusion is actually where he started. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher, all is vanity. Meaninglessness of meaninglessness. Pointlessness of pointlessness. Everything is pointless. After looking at nature throughout this book, he's looked at nature, wisdom, pleasure, education, work, accomplishment, success, time itself, life, death, money, politics, philosophy, justice, oppression, and honor. And every single time trying to find meaning to life under the sun in any of these things. But he just can't get around that it all ends in vanity. And this life without God, without the divine, that's all this life amounts to. This life is pointless. So he continues on, verse number 9. He has this shift of this third person, as if he's talking about somebody else, of saying the wisdom of the preacher. In verse 11, he says, the words of the wise are like goads, and like nails firmly fixed are the collected sayings. They're given by one shepherd. Now, the language here could be one shepherd, as in capital shepherd, like as in God, or it could just be a metaphor for a shepherd, any shepherd, just giving an illustration. Now, if it is the one shepherd, which would be God, of course, God in view is the source of all wisdom. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. That's how you get it. That's where you get it. However, in the second view, it's using a metaphor that just as a shepherd uses goads and tools with nails to lead a herd for their own good, so too the words of the wise men prod you into motion for your own benefit. The point is, we hear these terms, and you hear me for these past 12 weeks talking about the dead and how you're all going to die. They're meant to be goads. They're meant to be prods. Goads and prods are uncomfortable, but they're supposed to be to lead you in a place that is more full of life and is more full of happiness and is more full of joy. Because if you are in only the valley of this world, you're never going to find those things. You need to be poked and prodded and moved out of the lull of this world into the presence of God. For only in Him are you going to find meaning and purpose in this life or any life that ever was. This is the point of Ecclesiastes. It's not just supposed to be a book of speculation. It's not just a book of philosophy. It's not even just some advice to take. It means to challenge you, to poke and prod, which can often hurt, to get you out of a stupor you are in and to get you moving to the only place of true joy. This world makes you blind and short-sighted to what you are experiencing only in the right now. Ecclesiastes wants to goad you to think deeper than that, to remember the past, to enjoy the present. How many times has he said, eat, drink, enjoy the gifts that God has given you, and be aware of the future, to find ultimate meaning only in eternity. He says in verse 12, beware of anything beyond these. Of making many books there is no end, and of much study is the weariness of the flesh. In our age, the information age, we have this ridiculous idea that if we have just masses and masses and masses of information, it's somehow going to make us better. Now, I'm thankful for the internet. I use it every single day of every single week to look up something or do something or have some kind of function that it uses. However, it doesn't mean that the moral character, or more pointed to the book of Ecclesiastes, that meaning and purpose are going to be found with more and more information. The accumulation of information gives us what? More information. That's all it gives us. It doesn't give us meaning. It doesn't give us satisfaction. It doesn't give us purpose in life. It just gives us more facts. It gives us more stuff to deal with. In fact, sometimes it gives us more stress. It gives us more anxiety because now we have all kinds of information of things I'm not even supposed to know about. I mean, I can go look on the news and find some poor kid that was hit in a train in Colorado that I never even knew of, and now I feel sad about some kid I never met, never knew his name, never knew his face, never knew his family, never will. When there's so many hurting people right in front of me, this world bombards us with information. Of the making of books there is no end, and much study is a weariness of the flesh. I'm sure as Brother Mike goes through his seminary classes. This is becoming his life verse of the weariness of the flesh with much study. You can dive yourself into these things and drive yourself insane. In fact, those of the existentialist philosophers, such as the nihilists like Nietzsche and others, drove themselves to suicide, trying to figure out this world only in their own brains. And they couldn't do it. So in verse 13, he comes to the end, the completion. What's the point? What's the takeaway of this whole thing? So, what does he do with trying to answer the question, is there meaning to life, by only looking from a human perspective? He comes to the reality that the question itself, that this whole book has been based on, is in fact meaningless. That idea, that precept, that I'm going to figure out meaning in life only by what I see, touch, hear, and experience, that question itself is vanity. That question itself is pointless. This life is vain, and thus to ask if there is any meaning to life is a vain question. The only way this life matters is if the eternal life matters. If the eternal life matters, this life matters. If the eternal life doesn't matter, this life has no meaning. It has no purpose. You need heaven if you want the earth thrown in. So what is his conclusion? Well, in some senses, he gives up. He stops asking the meaningless question of is there meaning in a life of meaninglessness? And the answer is no. It's a question that negates itself. He stops looking at just the here and now. Because after a thorough examination from multiple angles, meaning must not be on this earth. Meaning isn't found here. Church, what does this mean? Now, ultimate meaning, ultimate purpose isn't going to be found in how much money you have in your bank account, what kind of house you have, what kind of car you drive. It's not even, beloved, ultimate meaning. There's meaning to it, but not ultimate meaning. Is even going to be found in your spouse, or your kids, or your accomplishments. It's going to be found only in God himself. This encapsulates all of the duty of man. Fear God. Have God in awe and wonder. And keep his commandments. Follow his word. Through all of this deep philosophical thinking, through all of this even examination of time itself that we've been through in this book, he comes down to fear God and do what God says. That's the height of true philosophy. Anything that denies those two facts denies not only the basis of any philosophy, it actually also denies the very core of what it means to be human. This is why man was created. We learn once again those simple truths from the catechism question. What is the chief end of man? To glorify God and enjoy him forever. That is everything we were built and made and created to be. And that means if we don't do that in our life, if we don't glorify him, if we don't enjoy him, we have lost the very essence of what it means to be human. You know, one of the horrors of hell isn't just fire and brimstone. It's this eternal feeling that you will never, ever, ever be what you were supposed to be. This feeling of constant, unfulfilled, deep down in your nature, that you'll never be the potential that God made you to be. To fear God and keep his commandments. Meaning is only found in him. Bartholomew says this, Ecclesiastes, like Job, holds out hope for those struggling amid the mysteries of what God is up to in their lives and thus in this world. Such agonizing struggles are affirmed and shown to be integral to the Christian life. These kind of doubts and worries about these big existential problems and questions aren't something that Christians are forbidden to do. In fact, Ecclesiastes shows the way in which we ought to do it, going sometimes into the uncomfortable places, asking the hard questions, asking sometimes the bold, audacious questions that we wonder where it's going to lead us and when we're going to come back to it. But we know the promise of Jesus. If you seek me, you will find me. If you are truly seeking after the one true and living God, he will reveal himself to you. Now, if it's a fake, superficial seeking, where I'm looking for an answer rather not to believe, well, you'll find that too. But if it's an honest-to-goodness questioning, an honest-to-goodness doubt in the soul, and yet you seek after the Lord Jesus, he will show himself to be true. This means that such a struggle doesn't mean you have no faith. You say, oh, I doubt, therefore do I have faith. Rather, it means the opposite, that only one who has a living faith that they are exercising in a world that is fallen and doesn't make sense, they are actually the ones with faith. The fact that you wrestle with doubt means that you still have faith in you. If you are here this morning and you struggle with your faith, it means you have faith. Trust in this world means little until it's needed. I can trust a parachute all I want, but it's not until I strap it on myself and jump out of a plane that I put trust into action. So too is faith. This world is fallen, broken, confusing. If my life was perfect and I had faith in God, what would that mean? Well, he took care of everything for me. That's what happened in the Garden of Eden. But in this life that is so broken, it's no wonder we have doubts. It's no wonder that sometimes we struggle. But that's what faith is. Faith is strapping on that parachute and trusting, not just in a piece of cloth, but trusting in God himself who has created all things. That he is the ultimate answer even as we struggle through our doubts. One can affirm a number of different doctrines, but it is in the real life of living in this world, along with its struggles and uncertainties, that faith is put into action. Trust in God. A battle inside your heart doesn't mean you're a bad Christian. It means faith is pushing back against the vanity of this world. It means something inside of you put there by the Holy Spirit says, no, this is wrong. This world can't be all there is. This doesn't make sense. Even like in the book of Psalms where David cries out, where are you, Lord, in the midst of my turmoil? How long have you hid your face from me? How long will you be far from me? And then he goes through the attributes of God and says, yet I know that I will be with you in the land of the living. That's true lament in this world. Knowing that, you know what, this world is bad. And we don't have to act like Christians like it's not. We don't have to have a perpetually stupid smile on our face, thinking that everything's great and dandy. There are times to weep and cry. There's times to struggle in this world. But we know that we trust in God more than the struggles in this world. Yes, it's bad. Yes, it's terrible. Yes, I can feel an overwhelming weight that I feel like I cannot get past, and yet faith, trust comes in when I say God will sustain me. And he will, beloved. You know, sometimes I've said this before. Some people say, oh, well, God will never give you more than you can handle. You know, that's not in the Bible. It's absolute, complete hogwash. God will give you far more than you can handle in this life. Drive you to your knees so that you go to him because God can handle it. We have a God that can handle everything this world throws at us. One commentator says, it is only in relationship with God as God and in submission to his will that we find ourselves to be truly alive and on the road to full humanity. Fearing God, obeying his commandments, this is the duty of man. This is what it means to be human at its essence and at its core. In fact, Ephesians 2:15 says that Jesus Christ is forming a new humanity. Why is that? Because we as humans, we haven't feared God and kept his commandments all of our life. What is the first and greatest commandment? To love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. To love Him with every fiber of your being. To love Him in your DNA, in your bones, in your molecules, in your platelets. And yet we love ourselves more than we love Him. And what does that mean? It means a separation from God. It means a constant unfulfillment away from the pleasures of who and what God Himself is. It means we are fallen, sinful, lost, condemned. That is why Jesus, the second Adam, came. And He died on a cross, taking on every single time we didn't fear God, every single time we didn't keep His commandments, took it upon Himself to take that punishment, die, and 3 days later to rise again from the grave. This is why Ephesians 2:15 talks about this new humanity in Jesus Christ. You see, the audacious claim of Ecclesiastes is that the only way to be truly, fully experience what true humanity is to be a Christian, is to put your faith and trust in Jesus. He will show you the way to meaning. He'll show you the way to life. He'll show you the way to purpose. He'll show you that your life doesn't have to be vanity. Your life can be full in the pleasures and security and confidence of who God is. For in verse 15, God will bring every deed into judgment with every secret thing, whether good or evil. Looking beyond this world and only what we can see with our eyes, there is coming a day of judgment when all of us will stand before God and give an account, even the secret things, the things you think no one knows about, the things maybe no one does know about, will all be brought to light, good or evil. The question is, will you stand trying to carry the weight and burden of your own sin? Or will Jesus Christ, your perfect advocate and mediator, stand on your behalf, plead His blood as your eternal sovereign lawyer to guess who the judge is? Jesus Christ again. He'll plead to Himself, His own blood, that you are His and you are pure and holy. And He won't just declare you not guilty, He will declare you innocent. That there is nothing in this person that has any condemnation worthy upon them. That there is no right to condemn this person by any source of cosmic law in any way, because Jesus Christ has made His people pure. So the offer stands to you today. A life of meaningful, eternal joy in God that makes this life have purpose, or a life of constant unfulfilledness, meaninglessness, purposelessness, and condemnation for all eternity, and suffering and eternal dissatisfaction. The choice is before you. So as we turn our hearts to the Lord's Supper, this picture of what Jesus did to bring about the new humanity, let us take some time as Pastor Skip comes to have a moment of reflection, an invitation based on what we heard.